The dust-covered streets of Cedar Ridge seemed to swallow all hope that sweltering summer day in 1875, when Eleanor Davis clutched her 6-year-old son Thomas to her chest, feeling the rapid beat of his terrified heart against her own. The auction block loomed before them, a crude wooden platform that had seen countless souls sold to the highest bidder. Though never before in this small Wyoming Territory town had a child been separated from his mother in such a public display of cruelty. "Please," Eleanor whispered to the stone-faced deputy holding her arm. "He's all I have left in this world." The deputy wouldn't meet her eyes. "Orders from Judge Wilcox. Your husband's debts need settling and the bank's claiming everything including the boy." Eleanor had arrived in Cedar Ridge 3 years prior with her husband Harold, full of dreams about their new life in the West. Thomas had been just a toddler then. When pneumonia took Harold last winter, she discovered the mountain of debts he'd hidden from her. She'd worked herself to exhaustion at the laundry, but it wasn't enough. Not nearly enough. The crowd gathered in the town square shifted uncomfortably. Some townsfolk looked away in shame while others watched with morbid curiosity. Judge Wilcox stood to the side, his expensive suit unmarked by the dust that covered everyone else, a testament to his position above the common folk of Cedar Ridge. "First item," called the auctioneer, a rail-thin man with yellowish teeth. "One healthy boy child, age 6, good for farm work or household service. Bidding starts at $20. "Mama!" Thomas cried, his small fingers digging into her threadbare dress. Eleanor felt her world collapsing. She'd been told they would be sold together. Another lie. "No, please, we were promised silence," Judge Wilcox commanded. "The law is clear. Your husband's property will be liquidated to cover his debts." "A child is not property," Eleanor shouted, her voice cracking with desperation. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some nodded in agreement, but none stepped forward. $25, called a voice from the back. "A farmer named Gentry who'd lost 2 sons to typhoid last year. He needed help with his fields." "30, countered Mrs. Peterson, the hotel owner's wife who'd been unable to bear children of her own. Eleanor's legs gave out, and she sank to her knees on the auction block, still clutching Thomas. The deputy moved to separate them, but a commotion at the edge of the crowd halted him. The spectators parted as a tall figure on horseback approached. The massive black stallion stopped directly before the auction block, and atop it sat Isaac Keller, his face partially shadowed by his wide-brimmed hat. The sun glinted off his silver spurs as he dismounted in one fluid motion, his long coat billowing behind him. Everyone in the territory knew of him, the quiet, enigmatic rancher whose sprawling property lay to the north, who rarely came to town except for supplies. Isaac's boots kicked up small clouds of dust as he strode purposefully toward the auction block, his presence commanding attention without a word spoken. He climbed the steps and stood beside Eleanor and Thomas, his piercing blue eyes surveying the crowd before settling on Judge Wilcox. "What's the total debt?" Isaac asked, his voice deep and steady. The judge cleared his throat. $218, Mr. Keller. But this auction is proceeding according to law." Isaac reached inside his coat and pulled out a leather pouch. He tossed it at the judge's feet, where it landed with a heavy thud. $300. That covers the debt and interest." "Now see here, Keller," Judge Wilcox sputtered. "The auction has already begun. Mrs. Peterson has bid $30 for the boy, $300, Isaac repeated firmly. "For both of them." He turned to face the crowd, one hand resting on his holstered revolver, though he made no move to draw it. "This family stays with me." He helped Eleanor to her feet with a gentleness that belied his rugged appearance, then crouched down to Thomas's level. Would you and your mama like to come stay at my ranch for a while, son? Got plenty of horses that could use a friend." Thomas looked up at his mother questioningly. Eleanor, still stunned by this unexpected intervention, could only nod. Judge Wilcox stepped forward, his face flushed with anger. "Keller, you have no right." "I have every right," Isaac cut him off. "I've paid the debt in full, unless there's some other law you've invented recently." The challenge in his voice was unmistakable. The townsfolk watched in tense silence. Everyone knew Isaac Keller was not a man to be trifled with. Though he rarely involved himself in town affairs, stories of his exploits during the war and his journeys through wild territories had traveled far and wide. The judge hesitated, then bent down to retrieve the pouch, quickly counting its contents. "The debt is settled," he announced grudgingly. "Mrs. Davis and her son are free to go." A collective sigh of relief swept through the crowd. Eleanor felt tears streaming down her face as Isaac gently guided her and Thomas off the auction block. "My things," she managed to say. "At the boarding house. We'll send for them," Isaac assured her, helping her onto his horse. He lifted Thomas up to sit in front of her, then took the reins and began leading them away from town. As they left Cedar Ridge behind, Eleanor finally found her voice. "Why did you help us, Mr. Keller? You don't even know us." Isaac glanced back at her, the late afternoon sun catching in his eyes. "Some things a man can't stand by and watch," he said simply. "No child should be taken from his mother, not while I draw breath." They traveled in silence for nearly an hour, Thomas eventually nodding off against his mother's chest. The land gradually changed from flat plains to gently rolling hills dotted with pine trees. Finally, they crested a rise, and Eleanor gasped at the sight spread before them. The Keller Ranch sprawled across a verdant valley, bisected by a gleaming ribbon of river. A large two-story house stood proudly at its center, surrounded by various outbuildings, corrals filled with horses, and grazing cattle. It was larger and more prosperous than she had imagined. "Welcome to Silverbrook Ranch," Isaac said, a hint of pride in his voice. "It's not much, but it's peaceful." "Not much." Eleanor thought incredulously. The ranch was magnificent compared to the tiny homestead she and Harold had struggled to maintain. As they approached the main house, a middle-aged woman with graying hair emerged onto the porch, wiping her hands on her apron. "Isaac Keller, you were supposed to be back hours ago with those supplies," she called out, then stopped short when she noticed Eleanor and Thomas. "What's this now?" "Mrs. Abigail Winters, this is Mrs. Eleanor Davis and her son Thomas," Isaac explained as he helped them dismount. "They'll be staying with us for a while. Mrs. Winters is my housekeeper," he added for Eleanor's benefit. Abigail's stern expression softened. "Well then, you poor things must be exhausted. Come inside and I'll fix you something to eat." Eleanor followed her into the house, carrying the still sleeping Thomas. The interior was surprisingly comfortable, with solid, well-crafted furniture and colorful quilts that added warmth to the rooms. Abigail showed them to a bedroom on the second floor, where Eleanor gently laid Thomas on the bed. "I'll bring up some water so you can freshen up," Abigail offered. "Dinner will be ready in about an hour." When she'd gone, Eleanor sat on the edge of the bed, finally allowing the events of the day to fully register. She'd nearly lost her son. They'd almost been separated forever. And then this stranger, this quiet cowboy, had stepped in and changed everything. The tears came again, silent but unstoppable. She didn't hear Isaac enter until he spoke from the doorway. "Mrs. Davis, I've brought up your things." He set down a small trunk, all that remained of her possessions. "Thank you," she managed. "I don't know how I can ever repay your kindness." Isaac shifted uncomfortably. "No need for that. There's plenty of work here if you're willing. Mrs. Winters could use help with the house, and I've got ranch hands who'd appreciate decent meals. Your boy will be safe, and you'll have a roof over your heads." "That's more than generous," Eleanor said, wiping her tears. Isaac nodded, then hesitated as if wanting to say more but thinking better of it. "Rest now. We'll talk more at dinner." With that, he left, closing the door softly behind him. Eleanor looked down at Thomas, sleeping peacefully now, unaware of how close they'd come to being torn apart. She stroked his hair, making a silent promise to rebuild their lives somehow, and to repay the debt she now owed to the mysterious Isaac Keller. The following weeks established a new rhythm to Eleanor's life. She woke before dawn to help Mrs. Winters prepare breakfast for the ranch hands, spent the mornings cleaning and organizing the main house, and the afternoons tending to the vegetable garden or helping with mending. Thomas quickly became everyone's favorite, shadowing the ranch hands when they'd let him, learning to ride a gentle pony Isaac had chosen especially for him, and bringing laughter to a place that had known too little of it. Isaac himself remained something of a mystery. He was often gone before sunrise, returning late, taking his meals quickly before retreating to his study. When he did interact with Thomas, there was a gentleness to him that contradicted his otherwise stern demeanor. With Eleanor, he was unfailingly polite but kept a careful distance. One evening, nearly a month after their arrival, Eleanor found Isaac alone on the front porch, smoking a cigarette and staring at the stars. "May I join you?" she asked hesitantly. He stood quickly. "Of course." They sat in silence for a while, the night air cool around them. "Thomas told me you're teaching him to track," Eleanor said eventually. Isaac nodded. "Boy's a natural, sharp eyes. He's never had a man take interest in him that way, not since his father died." She paused. "I want to thank you for that." "No need." "There is." Eleanor turned to face him. "Mr. Keller, Isaac," he corrected. "After all this time, please call me Isaac." "Isaac," she said, the name feeling strange on her tongue. "I need to know why you helped us that day. The real reason." He took a long drag on his cigarette, then extinguished it carefully. "When I was 8, he began, his voice low, "my mother fell ill. My father had died the year before in a mining accident. There was no one to care for us, my sister and me. The town decided we were a burden on public charity." His jaw tightened at the memory. "They separated us. Sent my sister to a family 2 counties over. Sent me to work a farm even further away." Eleanor's hand went to her mouth. "That's terrible. Never saw my sister again," Isaac continued. "Wrote letters for years but never got answers. Don't know if she's alive or dead." He looked directly at Eleanor, his eyes reflecting the moonlight. "When I saw you and your boy on that auction block, I couldn't stand by. Not again." "I'm so sorry about your sister," Eleanor said softly. Isaac shrugged, but the gesture couldn't hide the old pain. "It was a long time ago." "Some wounds never fully heal," Eleanor said, thinking of her own losses. "No," he agreed. "They don't." In that moment of shared understanding, something shifted between them. The careful distance Isaac had maintained began to dissolve. The next morning, Isaac invited Thomas and Eleanor to ride with him to check on a new calf born the previous night. As they rode side by side, Eleanor on a gentle mare, Thomas on his pony, and Isaac on his stallion, Eleanor felt a strange contentment she hadn't experienced since before Harold's death. The calf was healthy, nursing from its mother in a sun-dappled meadow. Thomas was enchanted, asking endless questions that Isaac patiently answered. On their return, they stopped by a clear stream for lunch, and Thomas convinced Isaac to help him build a small dam of stones and branches. Watching them work together, laughing as water sprayed up from their efforts, Eleanor felt a warmth spread through her chest. This was what Thomas needed, what they both needed. a sense of belonging, of safety. That evening, as Eleanor tucked Thomas into bed, he asked the question she'd been dreading. "Mama, are we going to stay here forever?" Eleanor smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "I don't know, sweetheart. This is Mr. Keller's home, not ours. But he likes us," Thomas insisted. "And I like him. He said I could help with the roundup next month. Did he now?" Eleanor smiled. "Well, we'll see. For now, let's be grateful for his kindness." After Thomas fell asleep, Eleanor found herself drawn to the porch again. As if expecting her, Isaac was there, a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses on the small table beside him. "Thought you might join me," he said, pouring a small measure into each glass. "Not much, but it helps take the edge off sometimes." Eleanor accepted the glass, taking a tiny sip. The liquor burned pleasantly down her throat. "Thomas tells me you've invited him to help with the roundup," she said. Isaac looked momentarily abashed. "Should have asked you first, but he's so eager to learn everything about ranch life. Reminds me of myself at that age." "It's fine," Eleanor assured him. "He worships you, you know. He's a good boy," Isaac said. "Smart, too. Been teaching him his letters when we have a spare moment." Eleanor stared at him in surprise. "You have?" Isaac nodded, almost embarrassed. "Hope you don't mind." Noticed he wasn't reading yet, and every boy should know how to read and cipher. "His father was going to teach him," Eleanor explained. "After he died, I tried, but with working at the laundry from dawn till dusk." She trailed off, guilt washing over her. "You did what you had to do," Isaac said firmly. "Keeping food on the table comes first." They fell into comfortable silence, sipping their whiskey and watching fireflies dance in the darkness. "Isaac," Eleanor said finally, gathering her courage, "I need to know what your intentions are." He turned to her, eyebrows raised. "For Thomas and me," she clarified. "We can't impose on your hospitality forever. I've been saving from the wages you pay me. Soon we'll have enough to move on, find a place of our own." Isaac set down his glass with deliberate care. "Is that what you want?" To leave, the question hung in the air between them, weighted with unspoken feelings. "I want what's best for Thomas," she answered carefully. "A stable home, a future." "And what about what you want, Eleanor?" His voice was gentle, but his eyes were intense. She looked away, unable to hold his gaze. "I've learned not to want things for myself. It only leads to disappointment." "Look at me," he said softly. When she did, the emotion in his eyes took her breath away. "I want you to stay," he said simply. "Both of you, not as employees, as family." Eleanor's heart stuttered in her chest. "Isaac," he held up a hand. "I'm not asking anything of you that you're not ready to give. I'm just telling you that this place, it's different with you and Thomas here. Better. And I'm a selfish enough man to want to keep it that way." Tears pricked at Eleanor's eyes. "We're broken, Isaac. I'm broken. Harold left us with nothing but debts and painful memories. We're all broken in some way," he replied. "Doesn't mean we can't find happiness again." He reached out, hesitated, then gently took her hand in his. The simple touch sent warmth coursing through her. "Think about it," he said. "That's all I ask." As summer turned to fall, Eleanor did think about it. She thought about it while hanging laundry in the crisp morning air, while teaching Thomas his letters alongside Isaac in the evenings, while lying awake at night listening to the coyotes call in the distance. She thought about Isaac's quiet strength, his kindness to Thomas, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled. She thought about the life they might build together, the healing they might find. The roundup came, bringing with it a frenetic energy as additional hands arrived to help gather the cattle. Thomas was beside himself with excitement, proudly wearing the small hat and vest Isaac had given him. He was assigned to help Mrs. Winters keep the chuck wagon supplied, a job he took with utmost seriousness. Eleanor worked alongside Abigail, preparing enormous meals for the hungry men. During a rare quiet moment as they sat resting their feet by the campfire, Abigail fixed Eleanor with a knowing look. "He's never been like this before," the older woman said. "Like what?" "Happy," Abigail stated simply. "I've worked for Isaac Keller for 15 years, ever since his uncle left him this ranch. He's been a good employer, fair and decent, but always with a darkness hanging over him, until you and that boy of yours came along." Eleanor felt her cheeks warm. "We're just grateful for his help." Abigail snorted. "It's more than gratitude I see in your eyes when you look at him, and we both know it." Before Eleanor could formulate a response, a commotion erupted from the direction of the herd. Men were shouting, horses galloping at full speed. Eleanor's heart seized when she heard Thomas's name among the shouts. She jumped to her feet, searching frantically for her son. Through the dust and chaos, she finally spotted him not safely by the chuck wagon where he should have been, but in Isaac's arms atop his stallion, racing away from a stampeding group of cattle that had somehow broken from the herd. Time seemed to slow as she watched Isaac shield Thomas with his body, guiding his horse with expert precision away from danger. When they finally circled back to the camp, Eleanor ran to them, tears streaming down her face. "Thomas Davis, what were you thinking?" she cried as Isaac lowered the boy into her arms. "I just wanted to see the cattle up close," Thomas sniffled, his face dusty but unharmed. "But something scared them." "A rattlesnake," Isaac explained, dismounting, "spooked one of the steers and a dozen others followed." Thomas was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Eleanor clutched her son tightly, her heart still racing. "You could have been killed." "But Mr. Keller saved me," Thomas said with absolute certainty. "He always keeps us safe." Later that night, after Thomas had been thoroughly scolded and then forgiven, Eleanor found Isaac alone by the fire. The other hands had retired to their bedrolls, leaving the camp quiet except for the crackling flames and distant lowing of cattle. "Thank you," she said, sitting beside him. "Again." Isaac nodded, poking at the fire with a stick. "Boy's getting bolder every day." "Too bold," Eleanor agreed. "But he's right about one thing, you do keep us safe." Isaac looked at her then, the firelight dancing across his features. "I'd die before I'd let anything happen to either of you." The simple declaration, delivered without drama or expectation, broke something open in Eleanor's heart. The walls she'd built since Harold's death, the caution she'd wrapped around herself like armor, began to crumble. "I've been thinking," she said quietly, "about what you said, about staying." Isaac went very still, the stick forgotten in his hand. "I'm afraid," she admitted. "Afraid of depending on someone again, of building a life only to have it taken away. But I'm more afraid of walking away from this chance. From you." She reached out, placing her hand over his. "If your offer still stands, we'd like to stay. As family." The smile that transformed Isaac's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He turned his hand to clasp hers, bringing it to his lips in a gentle kiss that made her heart flutter. "Nothing would make me happier," he said, his voice rough with emotion. The roundup ended successfully 3 days later, and the additional hands departed, leaving Silverbrook Ranch to settle back into its regular rhythms. Except now, everything felt different. Isaac took his meals with Eleanor and Thomas, lingered in the evenings to read or talk, and began making plans for their future. One crisp October afternoon, Isaac suggested a ride to show Eleanor a special place on the property. Thomas was occupied with lessons from Mrs. Winters, giving them a rare moment alone together. They rode side by side through golden aspen groves until they reached a high meadow overlooking the entire valley. The ranch spread out below them, the river glinting in the sunlight, cattle dotting the lower pastures like tiny specks. "It's breathtaking," Eleanor said, dismounting to better appreciate the view. "My uncle brought me here the day he told me the ranch would be mine someday," Isaac explained, coming to stand beside her. "Said a man needs to see what he's working for from a distance sometimes, to remember why it matters." Eleanor nodded, understanding. "And why does it matter to you?" "It used to be about proving something," Isaac admitted. "Proving I wasn't that helpless boy who couldn't even protect his sister. Proving I could build something lasting." He turned to face her. "Now it's about leaving something for Thomas and giving you the home you deserve." Eleanor's heart swelled with emotion. "You've already given us so much." "Not everything," Isaac said. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple gold band. "This was my mother's. I've carried it with me all these years, waiting for the right person to give it to." Eleanor's breath caught as he dropped to one knee before her. "Eleanor Davis, I know it hasn't been long, but I've never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you. I love your son as if he were my own. Will you marry me? Let me be a father to Thomas and a husband to you for all our days." Tears spilled down Eleanor's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak through the emotion choking her throat. When she finally found her voice, it was barely above a whisper. "Yes," she said. "Yes, with all my heart." Isaac slipped the ring onto her finger, then stood and pulled her into an embrace. When his lips met hers, Eleanor felt as though everything in her life, every hardship, every loss, every moment of despair had been leading her to this perfect moment of joy. They were married 2 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the ranch, with Thomas proudly serving as best man, Mrs. Winters sniffling into her handkerchief, and the ranch hands cheering as Isaac sealed their vows with a kiss. That night, after Thomas had fallen asleep in his room, Eleanor joined her new husband in what was now their bedroom. Isaac took her hands in his eyes full of love and promise. "That day at the auction," he said softly, "when I said this family stays with me, I had no idea I was claiming my own future happiness." Eleanor reached up to touch his face, marveling at how this strong, quiet man had transformed her life. "You saved us," she whispered. Isaac shook his head, drawing her close. "No, Eleanor, you saved me." 5 years later, Silverbrook Ranch had prospered beyond all expectations. The main house had been expanded to accommodate not only Thomas, now 11 and growing like a weed, but also 3-year-old Grace and 1-year-old James, the children born from Isaac and Eleanor's union. On the anniversary of the day, Isaac had first brought Eleanor and Thomas to the ranch. The family gathered on the front porch after dinner. Thomas was reading aloud from a new book Isaac had brought back from his last trip to Cheyenne, while Grace attempted to braid her mother's hair and baby James dozed in Isaac's arms. As the sun set over their land, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, Eleanor leaned against her husband's shoulder, contentment washing over her. "Happy?" Isaac asked softly, his arm tightening around her. Eleanor looked at Thomas, confident and articulate where once he had been frightened and uncertain. She looked at her younger children, born into security and love. And she looked at Isaac, whose eyes still held the same tenderness they had the day he'd stepped up to the auction block and changed their destiny. "More than I ever dreamed possible," she answered truthfully. The family stayed on the porch until the stars appeared, a testament to love's power to heal, to build, and to create a future from the broken pieces of the past.